Welcome back to to Island Tea with your faves, Kevon and Amali, and we are joined. This is Eat Local
Espresso.
Espresso with our
Jade,
special.
just change the machine.
And I can change them back because I want it to be Eat Local. So this is Eat Local with our special guest, Dr. Terrance Drew. Welcome.
Thank you very much. Pleasure to be here in the presence
We just start,
of
so you
your-
show it.
Yes, I really appreciate
Give it about 5 minutes and you'll regret coming.
We'll see. Right, so I'm happy to be here, and I want to applaud y'all on what y'all are doing. I think it brings a different flavor in, communicating with our people, and especially to see young people at the helm of, projects like these, initiatives like these. This gives me a great deal of hope. I just want you all to know and bring a word of encouragement that most significant changes that would have taken place throughout human history were started with idealistic young people. Of course, with the wisdom and guidance of those who would have been before us, our elders. So I want to encourage you all to continue pushing forward.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir.
So who is the elder here?
Well, it's interesting. I might be the elder here, but interesting. I'm still.
You're old, don't you?
I young enough.
Wow. But yeah,
Right.
but we like to start our show with usual. For those listeners who aren't familiar with who you are and what you do, just give us a brief,
Right.
history of Dr. Terrance Drew from beginning to end.
Right.
Your journey.
Well, I am from Upper Monkey Hill, St. Peters. That is where I originated. My mother, who I had some good time with this morning. I'm fortunate to have my mother and father alive and in good health. And Sunday, I spent some good time with my father, Michael Heiliger. Right. And then today, very early, I spent some good time with my mother, Gurzel Pet Mills. She's Rastafarian. I think my mother might be, by even chronological age, maybe one of the oldest Rastafarians in St Kitts. And so I grew up mainly between both, but I was raised fundamentally by my grandmother in Upper Monkey, but spending time between my mother and father. Two completely different worlds. But I come to understand that there was something that unified even those different worlds, and that's our humanity. We are really one people on the face of the earth. Humanity is one. So that is where I come from, in Upper Monkey Hill. So I went to St. Peter's Primary School, which is now the Dean's Glassford Primary School. Never went to preschool. I don't think preschool were popular back then. And then I went through the whole of primary school. I'll give you an interesting history. During my primary school, my mother stopped me from school for a year. Interesting. And then she had to go to court. And the case is a very interesting case because she was of the opinion that the school system was brainwashing me in the sense that it was teaching me that, and her biggest issue was Christopher Columbus, that she could not understand why is it I would be taught that he was a hero. And she thought that that was not right. Interestingly enough, when she went before the judge, because the whole question was whether you should be in school or not, I think, and I still need to look for the case to see what was the decision in that case. Because the case was a question of child abuse and brainwashing. So that was my first real experience of what social justice is. And so that had a profound impact on me, even though I was young. Eventually, of course, I went back to school and so forth, but I think that I needed to say that so people can understand me on a deeper level. And so I went back to school, went to Bastia Junior High School, which is now where Washington and Archibald is, Bastia High School. And then after that, I went to the sixth form. The sixth form back then was different. It was maybe 2 classes at the end of high school, and the classes were at the old Bastia High School.
Okay.
So there was no CFBC, and so at that point in time.
Right.
And then after that, I went back to Bastia High School and taught for 2 years as a substitute teacher where I taught physics and maths. And then after that, I went to Cuba. I chose Cuba for a couple of reasons. One, I wanted to see a different culture, learn a different language. and it would have been a different type of system and get a different perspective on life, so to speak.
So the social aspect.
The social aspect was very attractive to me. I really wanted to experience that and not just about getting some academic knowledge. And then after that, I went I came back after Cuba, worked here for a few years, and then I, did the U.S. exams and got a spot at the university to pursue my specialty, which I completed. And then after completing, I decided to come back home. I never ever really deeply contemplated living outside of St. Kitts, even when I was in the United States, with all the opportunities that are there and still there. I decided that I come back home, and to this day, I have not regretted coming back home, and I don't think I'll ever regret coming back home. I mean, people.
That makes one of us.
And
but what do you think was that that pull, that what was that thing that kept you kept you anchored here in St. Kitts?
Right. So I think for a number of reasons, as I tell you, the way I grew up with a strong sense of what social justice is and who I am as a Caribbean man and a Kittitian, always with the, in the forefront of my mind that you have to go back home to serve your people. And so that is what drives me to come back home to serve the people of St. Kitts and Nevis, because it's very important as far as for me. So that is what drives me, service to the people, because I grew up listening to, when I was with my grandmother, I went to Sunday school every day, and that is my foundation. But having been with my mother also, and you listen a lot of reggae music, you get a deep sense of social justice, who you are, what's your responsibility in the society, and so forth. And so I take that very, very personal and very deeply, and that is my guiding star. So whatever happens around, that is what guides me, that I'm here to develop myself the best I can and to serve the people the best I can, humanity wherever they are, but especially, as Malcolm X say, you must start at home.
So you pursued a career in medicine, you specialized, you came back home, you've been practicing. From what I understand, you're an internist?
Yes.
By you call it speciality?
Yes.
Can you go into a little bit about what, because it's only like last year I actually learned of the term internist,
Yes.
Because I was having some issues last year medically, and somebody said, you need to say an internist. So I was like, just making up things.
I know it is. Every day,
I've never heard about someone.
I know, but internal medicine is that part of medicine that is basically, it deals with a lot of procedures, but it is mainly non-surgical. So there's a surgical aspect of it, and there's a non-surgical aspect. But there are some procedures, of course, that you do. So the basis of it is to deal a lot with the internal organs and the general health, of the human being. So it can deal with the heart, the lungs, the kidneys, and so forth. And then when you go into internal medicine to study, you study all of this. You can still decide to focus on one particular organ. So a man might decide, I'll just focus on the heart, I'll just focus on the kidneys. And so it is that realm. So when you think of it, it's that part of medicine that, you're necessarily not going for surgery that deals with everything else. If I have a lung condition that is not surgical but medical, who do I go to? I have a heart condition, who do I go to? So in the realm of internal medicine, you have all these others. So we manage those things basically. So that is where it has. So I can decide at some point, maybe I might focus on a particular organ or not, go down that path. So it is that area that deals with that, and you can go into branches as you see fit. So probably what you had, I agree, not knowing what you have, but if it's not surgical, I think you probably needed to see an internist.
He wasn't surgical at all. That's good. So when exactly were you called to serve in the political realm?
Right. So
wait, before I answer that, when did that happen and how did it happen? Like what were you doing? Paint the picture for us. You're home eating, a piece of pie in front of the TV.
Yes.
And then somebody messaged you or called you and said we need to talk, and we want the whole story.
Right, let me give you the whole story how that happened. Well, basically I was in the United States. I was in Texas at the time. And I think I had always been associated with the St Kitts and Nevis Labour Party. That is my political orientation.
Okay.
And so while I was there are a number of political occurrences that were taking place in St Kitts and Nevis. For example, the party was becoming divided. I think 2 senior ministers had left, and the deputy prime minister then had left the party. And so people started to reach out to me, and they asked me if I would consider. I would say, I said to them, look, I'm pursuing my studies here. I think I have some more work to be done. But it seems like that it would not have been immediate. I mean, before people used to run the idea by me, but I think I did not consider it seriously, because I think when people get into politics, you have to bring something. And you would have had to develop yourself enough to bring something. And I think I was on my path of making sure that I complete that. But when that came, people started calling me and said, Drew, you're considering what you're thinking. I said, man, I have a few more months to go. You know, people have been asking me this for some time. You know, let's see what happens. But I think there was a moment in it all. I think it was a meeting at the village, at the community center.
In St. Peter.
Yes, and that meeting involved the then Prime Minister, Dr. Denzel Douglas, and the Deputy Prime Minister.
Azem?
No, the
Kondo.
ex-Deputy Prime Minister, Sam
Also
Kondo.
before Sam left. Okay.
And when I saw that, something touched me. I said, wow, the party that I think would have, from my political orientation, would have contributed to the overall development of St. Kitts, a party that would have moved St. Kitts from one level to the next, a party which would have benefited so many people. This party seems like is really under stress. It is fracturing, it is breaking, and then one has to ask a serious question. If you were to get involved, at which point would you get involved? Now, to get involved when something is being broken is one of the biggest decisions to make. It is easy when it is wholesome and it's
When
easy
everything
to join,
good, yeah.
when everything good. But to step in when everything falling apart,
Not to help
I
put it
think,
together.
yeah, because you have to,
challenging, yeah.
you have to grab it now and pull it back together, understanding that it will be rough. So I understood that from the beginning, and I know getting in at that point politically would have been one of the most difficult positions. You see, when you're building something that is there that you can build, it's easier. But when something is fracturing and breaking away and people moving and people having, you know, the internal fight and struggle, that I understood would take time to rebuild and to mend. and that is real. Yeah, it's a whole work and a
Conflict in
project.
itself is hard to resolve.
Yes.
In any easy way in the short term.
Right. And especially when it's taking place internally, it will fracture it. And so I felt that I would have benefited significantly from the policies of the Labour Party. That was my political orientation. But apart from that personal aspect, I saw that the philosophy of the party was the best philosophy at that time of any political party for St. Kitts and Nevis. And I say, if it's any time, if I really were to consider it, this is one of the most difficult times. But sometimes you have to step in when it is most difficult.
In the deep end.
In the deep end.
And hope you go swim.
And then you swim. And then I've been swimming since. I've been swimming since. So when I told them, yes, I will come and I would do it, you know. The people would say, Joe, maybe it's the worst time to get in. But I said, okay, let's see. And I would allow time to take care of that. So it has been a challenging journey, you know, just trying to bring the party back together, being a part of it, working, of course, with thousands of people. I'm the chairman of the party now, and I consider
Congrats.
that, yes, a significant, you know, it's very important, that position, and I really think that there's a lot to be done and can be done to make sure that we mend it back. And I think we will, and we are on the path of doing that.
Tell us about your last experience in the general election. I mean, you ran into election.
Yes.
The first one, imagine, was, I think it was like 300 or something, 200 or something?
200 and something.
2 something.
Very.
And then this last one, which I'm sure hurt the most.
Yes.
It was like, what, 24, 23?
Yeah, 24.
Like, I always tell people, if I were to compete in anything, like, if you beat me by a lot. Like,
Yeah,
Not a little bit.
So close, eh?
It was so
I like when Azem moved by 4, and so I was like, oh Lord. Because you start wondering, what could I have done to get those
Yeah.
those little
Those
the last few.
Right.
So how was that experience
Well,
in June?
In the first experience, just to
Oh, you
wrap
go
it
back
up
to that,
quickly,
yeah.
yes, the first experience when I lost by 2 something, I spoke to people and I listened to people who follow politics, and I recognized that was not a bad loss. Now, you might say it's a number, and a number look
No,
big,
man.
but I consider a couple of things. One, the party was fracturing and breaking. 2, I had not been in St. Kitts. I was in the United States and came home. I only had just over a year to campaign. And here you had a man who had won the seat while Labour was in government. he had been in politics for all these years, and all he could have beaten me by was 200 and something.
Right.
So from my perspective, I said this was a weak candidate. That is my perspective. You should have beaten me
And
by...
a good start for yourself.
Exactly. He should have beaten by over 500 easy. This is a newcomer, just come straight from the United States.
Right.
The party is fractured. I have been on this ground for over 20-something years. He's only here for a year and something. And you can only beat me by 200 and something. And the other thing is, remember that they got their overseas votes and we did not get. And then I realized that the candidate really had some issues. And so I knew I could have beaten him. And so I said, okay, I can beat him on the next election. And what happened in this next election is that he was beaten. I knew that. In the last few months of the elections, this is where COVID hit. Right. I did not need any overseas vote to beat him. This is where COVID hit. And one of the things that was well orchestrated by them is to make sure that I could not get to the door of the voter by shutting out the opposition. So we could not canvass, we could not campaign. If you are in politics and you can't get to the door of the voter, you're wasting your time. You understand? No matter how much money is spent and all of this is done, if you cannot get to the voter to ask that voter for their vote to sell them your program, you are not in politics. That is the fundamental of it. So when I look back on the last face-to-face interaction, so when I look back on the last election, even when you're in big countries, the face-to-face interaction is the most important. How did Obama win? In 2 years before, Obama went to Iowa, and Obama went house to house in Iowa. So by the time the primaries come, Obama then went to all these far-out places where these white people were that nobody ever visit.
Right.
And they said, boy, you took the time to drive 50 miles, 100 miles to come and ask me for a vote in the country. So by the time Hillary Clinton was ready to move into Iowa, Obama had already canvassed. And people say, how did these white people vote for him? They voted for him for one reason. He did not send them interest. He went face to face and asked them for their vote. That is a very interesting history. So I think the crux of the matter for me for this election, irrespective of everything, is how you were able to keep me away and the Labour Party away from the voters while you had the opportunity. And there was an article by the New York Times, and I'll share it with you all, that was written on June 29th. And it spoke about the threat to democracy in the Americas and the Caribbean, and saying it was a focus. Because when they did the analysis, they recognized and they said democracy was under threat in St Kitts and Nevis. And they came down to this conclusion. The government could have gone out and meet the voter, and the opposition could not. And if you are prevented from meeting the voter, that is what you consider to be the most egregious act against democracy in any democratic system, where you cannot meet the people. And so the New York Times did analysis, and they did that. So when I bring it down from last election, why it, and we can go through, because there are a lot of other things that happened with my seat. I mean, it took over 24 hours to count the votes. And I can go into the mechanisms and things that took place and how they tried to intimidate the counters and so forth. But I think the crux of the matter, there are issues of bribery, cheating and so forth, which we have evidence on. But the number one thing that I still cannot really forgive for is that you must never, ever keep the people from the people when it comes to politics, while one can do it and the other can't. That I cannot just
level playing field.
Level playing field. Just give me a chance to get to the voter. You could give them $1 million, that's up to you, but you give me a chance to talk to the voter.
And then even with the unlevel playing field, you still manage to pull through by well, they still pull through by
20-something votes. I was still able to cut it by 200 and something votes, even keeping me away from the voter. So I know if I had those 2-3 months to meet the voter, I would have won the seat easily.
So you're saying you'll win the next time, that's what you're saying?
Well, I'm saying that I want it now.
Oh, okay. So you'll win again.
I'll win, but I'm serious about that, and that is, so the court cases, of course, and so challenges.
Of course, we can discuss that.
Because the other thing, I wouldn't go too deep into the court because sub judice say, but I would say this, that the names that were taken off the list, that again, people shut up to vote and the names were off the list. Just taken off. You understand? And that again is an egregious act when it comes to the whole process of democracy. The names were taken off the list. And so that is why you see that I am saying to people that the elections are not over yet. Because if these questions are not answered and these things are not settled, what would prevent them from happening again? What would prevent you from just taking names off the list? What would prevent you from finding some reason to keep the opposition from meeting the voter? What would prevent you from doing those things again? And that is why I am saying that these things must be heard and must be ventilated, not just for my good, but for the good of democracy. There has to be a level playing field as far as those things are concerned, because if people start to manipulate the system, these things have effects and repercussions that we don't even foresee at this point in time.
So, but obviously, one of the goals of hearing these concerns, challenging them, even to the point of taking them to court, is to, over the long term, aid in proper democracy going forward. Correct?
Correct.
In the short term, however, because these challenges are brought in the past election, what is the goal, or what do you hope to see coming out of these challenges? Well,
I put in my first challenge because for me, if I allow this to pass, for those people who work so hard on this campaign, people who saw the injustices that took place in constituency number 8, even on count day, and I have the evidence, and I don't bring this before a court to have them ventilated and be heard, then I'm asking even my own self, what am I worth fighting for a better St Kitts and Nevis and a better democracy? And that's one of the things. In the short term is really to ask the people in constituency number 8 to have a fair chance of choosing who they want to lead them.
Understood.
That is in the short term. And in the long term, I'm going to call for campaign finance reform. I'm going to call for integrity in public life. I'm going to call for an overview of the electoral system so that whatever is done, let there be a true level playing field so that you can have, because in the arena of politics is a battle of ideas. Let's battle with ideas. Let's all get to the same person and let's put our ideas there and give the people a chance to choose the candidate who they think have the best ideas to lead the country forward. That is what I'm hoping for.
I'm very glad you mentioned electoral reform, constitutional reform, integrity in public life, that because something that we discuss here on the show quite often is the fact that in the Caribbean and in St. Kitts in particular, the Prime Minister and the government, cabinet wields an unprecedented amount of power compared to other nations.
Indeed.
Right? And it's a lot of power with zero to little accountability.
That is
right.
True.
Cabinet ministers can do things and say things and thing, and it just gets swept under the rug, and nobody there to say, well, you actually violate X, Y, Z, and this needs to be addressed. And that happens, not just in St. Kitts, but across the region.
Across the region, yes.
Right?
And as you talk about across the region, the British government just launched a big inquiry, an investigation into political corruption in the BVI. Right. In St. Martin, the political leader there is actually locked up for corruption because the Dutch launched an inquiry. So what happens in this jurisdiction where you can really have an independent body to investigate political corruption, they are coming up on the bad side because things that we take for normal here are they are politically corrupt. Right? So our standard is so low that when we see people really lift the standard, we're like, really? Look what happened. Really? So that is the whole thing about it. So you're correct that we need to keep these things in check. So I want to see these integrity in public life bodies with teeth, you understand, that can make sure, because let me tell you, corruption accounts for a drop in GDP. If you were to, the more corruption there is, the lower the GDP. The least corruption there is, the better the chance. What if, for example, you were just chosen on your merit? So, man, give him a chance on his merit. I don't care who he voted for, where he went, give him a chance on his merit. You know what that would do? It would automatically select the best people for a particular position, for the job. And when you have the best people for jobs in position, what does that mean?
Efficiency, productivity,
innovation, growth. And that is what we have to yearn for. So I want to see that type of, you can put me through the ringer. I have nothing to hide because that is how I believe politics should be practiced. I know there are some controversial things, and I've said, I remember as the chairman of the St Kitts and Nevis Labour Party, along with the leader, we brought something called the Code of Ethical Conduct to the Labour Party before the Integrity in Public Life was commissioned. I sat here and I told John L. Powell, look, you're a young chairman of PAM, I'm a young chairman of Labour. Why can't we come together and put this code of conduct of how people should act? And if let's forget the old politics. Let's bring something new. And at that time, General Powell pushed it off and said, man, this and this. I said, no, this ain't a talk. Let's do it. And when General Powell was caught in his issue, I said to myself, and I never had the opportunity to see him again since, but these are exactly the type of things that we are trying to keep out of politics. You cannot be convicted in a court, even if it's civil, for misappropriation of funds, and even considered to run for politics. You can't, because misappropriation means that you would have violated trust on a fundamental level. And a court would have looked at the evidence and reached a conclusion. And then you would have to be in charge of millions upon millions of dollars in a budget of the people's money. So there is a question of trust. So this is not based on personality. This is based on a principle. Had that been me who was charged even for some little thing, they would have said, boy, Drew, you got to get out of politics, you have to do that. So what I want is that we look at personalities. We have a set of standards.
For reputation.
For reputation. So that when you step out, you say, man, this minister is from here and here. Imagine if you step out and somebody say, where this minister from? Let's research him. Oh, misappropriation of funds. And he come to represent St Kitts. How does that make us look? That put in the head of a nefarious investor, but maybe I can approach this minister because he's prone to these type of things. One thing in politics, why it is so important, when you run for political office, you get calls from many persons internationally. People who are looking for the right person to spend the right money for the in. But it is very dangerous because you don't know about it. You all don't even know about it, but I'm revealing it to you. That if you don't have the right person with the right mindset who said that I cannot sell out my people, your country can be sold from under your feet and you don't know. That is why integrity, especially for small countries like these, are so important because we don't have monies, we don't have armies, we don't have so many things to protect us. Only integrity and transparency and openness can really protect us from these nefarious persons. Just like the billionaire who had that call with the Prime Minister. And you hear what the billionaire said? When elections come, you're going to come to me, Prime Minister. Go and read from the London court what the transcript was. This is in record. He said, you Prime Minister, when elections come, you are going to need me. You know what he was saying to the Prime Minister? I control the purse here because you're going to need campaign funds to run your campaign. And therefore, I must control you from now. So he's badly...
Can't just come later.
Can't come later. But the risk is he's in charge of a country. So I point out that to show you how deep this thing can get. And so therefore, it is important that these institutions are in place to protect our people and protect our country.
We're going to pause now for a little...
No, man. I have a question though, because
Yes.
what is interesting and about what you're saying is that to someone listening, they may come away with a very bleak view of our political systems and the present state of our democracy. Is that an accurate depiction? And if so, is it the steps that you outlined just now, which is these institutions that would help to curb and keep corruption in check? Is that the way? And if not, then what is your view of the present political climate?
That's a very profound question. My view of the present political system and over the years is that integrity in public life is seen as an afterthought. It's not taken seriously. It is in a very, very bad state. Why do I say that? You have two ministers who are guilty of misappropriation of funds. In other countries, these lawyers are locked up. And I want you to look at the cases in Jamaica and Trinidad. They are locked up. You have a prime minister who was caught on tape by a foreign government for bribery, according to the English court. These are documented. These are not accusations. They can be read, and we have ventilated them. So it's hard for me to say that we are in a good stead. I'm not looking for perfect people to be in politics at all. You cannot be perfect. But one has to understand that while you are not perfect, there are certain things that we will not accept. We just can't accept it because it just cannot be a part of the whole process of integrity in public life and so forth. So the question you ask me, I think we are really low down when it comes to that. Not because of where I'm at, but I'm looking at specific court cases and using that as a measure to determine where we're at. How are we going to do it? We need to set up these institutions and give them teeth. Not that the appointment is dependent on a politician so that if you don't do it my way, you are gone. That they have to be appointed. I am also looking for ways, how can we independently appoint these people and protect them? So that if Dr. Drew does something wrong, they can come to the fore without fear of they being targeted or the family being targeted. To say, Dr. Drew, you have been found to this, and this, brings into question your integrity, and therefore you cannot stand in the parliament. You cannot be a member of cabinet. And that organization and the members thereof will not be targeted. Until we reach that, I think we will be in a sad state, and the Prime Minister will wield all the power he wants and determine who gets a job, who doesn't get a job, who gets appointed, who doesn't get appointed. Until we can clean up, I don't think you'll ever be perfect, but until at least we have some minimal standard with those type of things. So people in St. Kitts are living high stress because somebody can be in a job, have a nice home, paying a mortgage, and if the government changes tomorrow, the bank come for your home. How can people live like that? Think about it. So you don't know if your job is going to, if you're a political appointee, you must understand. But if you're appointed to the civil service, for example, you should understand that there should be some level of protection, some security, and lower the stress level of the people of St. Kitts and Nevis. You can't be on the road putting up a sign saying stop, just working as a humble crossing guard, and you are thinking, boy, I may not get a benefit because of which party I support. We have to find ways to eliminate those things. Until then, I think St. Kitts would be very political, even at the minuscule level. But apart from that, the tribalism will continue, and people would live with very high stress levels. And we can do something about that by protecting our people and asking them for one fundamental thing, that you be a diligent worker, a hard worker, promoting the upliftment of your country. And you vote for who you want. You pour on what shot you want. You argue
Without
for who
fear
you want.
of victimization.
Without fear of victimization. I like to walk down the road and meet a unity man and a unity man and say, but Joe, I may like what you say, may like that. What going on? That is a battle of ideas. That is how our country grows. Let me and you battle it out. You understand? If I in a position, because you tell me that I supposed to go look for your name now and tell you can't eat tomorrow when you got 2 children home and sabotage you and sabotage your business, even if I have the tendency as a human being, there have to be standards in place, institutions in place to say, but even if the thought comes,
Still
you don't
can't
even
do it.
can't do it. Because this is here to protect the people from you. And protect you sometimes even from yourself. From yourself. So that is what I want to see the young people strive for. And say, look, we have to get these things in place. Because we want to take St. Kitts to the next level, and we're going to work as hard as possible to eliminate this. If you have an issue with me, let me and you meet anytime, any place, and let's debate it and let the people decide.
It's interesting you said that, because one of the counter arguments is generally what we expect to happen is when our leaders act in ways that do not reflect or live up to our expectations. That is why in our system we have elections but what you're suggesting is that the elections doesn't allow people to do that simply because of the way the system and for fear of victimization and stuff like that. So your solution to that dynamic is the institution of these, and so you don't see those problems as being separate and needing separate types of solutions, but you feel that it all comes from the development of the institution itself.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct. That is what saved America this last time. Because America, even though they were at the verge of losing their democracy, because they have such strong institutions in place, that even when you move like that, when these institutions start to wield their power, you see how quickly they were able to pull it back together. If they didn't have that, if you get a leader like that, but you don't have the institutions to protect your country from leaders like that, because from time to time people like this will filter through, because it is how it is.
Right.
That is why the founding fathers of America, and Hamilton, who was born in Nevis, look at his Federalist Papers and what he said, especially about impeaching a president. Because they foresaw human beings in the darkest part of their minds that at some point somebody can filter through. But let's make sure we have everything in place to make sure he doesn't get to power. Look at Germany. When Hitler came, Germany did not have the institutions in place to prevent somebody like Hitler from coming to power. And even when he came to power, the institutions were so weak, they could not prevent Hitler from, doing what he did to Germany and the rest of Europe. So that is why our only hope sometimes is to put these things in place so that in the event that someone comes through who does not, who does not hold these ideals, that the institutions, the structuring can actually protect us from personalities like these. And so that is why even though people look at America as going through a tough spot, I say America allow somebody to come through, but the institutions in the end were strong enough to protect the country. Germany did not have that, and as a result, millions of people died. And so that is why I say that is the solution. So it's not about personality, it's really about principles. And even though we will never be perfect, we should always strive for what Obama said, ever striving for the perfect union. It will never happen, but it's a lofty goal and
it's something to attain.
It's something to,
So,
it's a guiding star.
Well, Azem usually asks profound questions, but I ask hard ones. And you seem to be an individual who is quite open and willing to touch any topic and willing to speak honestly and truthfully. So we spoke about the level of unprecedented power that the office of the Prime Minister, the cabinet itself, the government itself, wields in the Federation and across the region. We speak about victimization, we speak about lack of integrity in public life and the institutions to basically safeguard citizens from victimization, etc. But this was inherited from a previous government, which was your party, and that was inherited from the PAM government before that, and Labour government before that again, right? Which means it's a systematic problem, right? So it ain't just Timothy Harris, it ain't just Douglas, it ain't just Kennedy Simmons, it ain't just Bradshaw. It's a weakness in our laws, in our constitution.
And self-perpetuating.
Exactly, right? That being said, you are now the chairman of the Labour Party. The leader of the party is still Dr. Douglas. The last two elections, and the first one when Labour lost the election was, and people ask me, I'm open about it, like, that wasn't a war against Labour, that was a war against the leader, right? The union of the other three parties to form Team Unity was about Douglas, it wasn't necessarily about Labour, right? I don't know if you would agree with that. So, that all those things being said, I said that to say this, what is different about Labour now as opposed to Labour before when Team Unity? 2015, right? Because the same lack of accountability is in place, but the leader is still the same, right? I think a lot of people have an issue with that. The fact that whether Douglas was guilty or not of the things he was accused of, I don't know, I can't speak to that. However, the perception is that he was guilty, right? And that led to, or at least assisted in, contributed to the Labour Party losing the 2015 election, right? So what is happening now? What changes are happening within the party now that can reassure the people, listen, the things that Labour is complaining about now, which is the the unfairness of Team Unity, and the things that people in the country complained about when Labour was in power, which was victimization and wherever it was. What has changed now that the people can look to Labour and say, okay, well, this is where we need to go next election?
Right. Good. So I'll answer that question, and I wouldn't stay too long on a background. Because you mentioned Robert Bradshaw. I will say about Robert Bradshaw, remember he was fighting against the colonialists, right, who was the English power. And, to his credit, he was able to do a number of landmark things, set up a public health system, a secondary education system that we take for granted. St Kitts and Nevis had one of the first comprehensive secondary education where every man was entitled, whether his mother was cutting cane or sweeping the drain. In other countries, they couldn't get a secondary education. He was also able to take back the land and buy Frigate Bay. I will tell you, your great-great-grandparents, black people, couldn't go to Frigate Bay to bathe. Under Bradshaw, they were able to go to the beach, and that is why you see. So in fairness, he tried to set up these institutions coming from colonialization in a sense, to establish the foundation of St. Kitts and Nevis. Now, with respect to Dr. Douglas, a lot of things were leveled against him. He's not a perfect man. He's not. But what I have come to recognize is that there is no court objectively would have heard any case about Dr. Douglas. I have any information that this man was so corrupt and so forth. I mean, I'm saying people have their perceptions, but I just want to put it in perspective. Unlike while he was being criticized to have been so corrupt and so forth, and I'm not bashing people's ideas, but I just bringing the facts forward. The first time we had a prime minister who was caught on tape for bribery and so forth was this one. The first time we had ministers in government for misappropriation of funds was in this government. But irrespective of that, I would answer the question now where the Labour Party is going. Now, the Labour Party is doing a lot of work internally. A lot of people saying, where's Labour? We're not hearing anything. Sometimes you have to step back and do your work internally.
And fix the machinery.
And that is the process that we are going through presently. One of the things that we brought forth was the Code of Ethical Conduct. For me, that was very important, so that any member of the St. Kitts and Nevis Labour Party would have to govern themselves by that, especially the executive and the leaders by that. If a man is charged with something, of course, he must be given his day in court. He must be given a fair chance to say, boy, yeah, these charges were brought, but after ventilation, it may not have been that. I don't have any information anywhere by any court, even Dr. Douglas would have been taken to court a number of times to show that he actually participated in any of these. If a man has been brought and you cannot provide for me any evidence outside of the political rancor, then therefore it means therefore that the evidence as is, it has to be, the decisions have to be made on the evidence given. Now, the Labour Party is doing a lot. So you will see fundamental changes. We are restructuring, we are reorganizing, we are rebuilding the machinery so that when the Labour Party again start to move and present itself to St. Kitts and Nevis, the principles on which we stand will not change. But the way in which we work things, there will be changes because the motto of the Labour Party is for the good that we can do. And of the union is unity of strength. I want you all to know, unity of strength ain't just come now. That is from the Labour Union. That is the motto of the Labour Union. I know you might be shocked to know that. So when I say unity of strength, I'm talking about my union, who had that motto since the 1930s. All right? So those principles don't change, but the way in which we're going to work them, you'll see changes. Because we are from a different generation, we will bring innovation and so forth to the fore. And then the party would decide, how the party is going to transition in the future. And the question about Dr. Douglas, the party will answer that question. Because I think at the end of the day, the party would look at the situation and determine what is the best way forward. I would just say that, nobody outside would determine eventually the decision that the party makes. But the party is also a prudent party, the oldest party. We might be the oldest political party in the Caribbean. We might be. In the OECS for sure. That is how old we are. The Antigua Labour Party, St. Lucia Labour Party, all these parties came after us. Maybe the Communist Party of Cuba might be a party that is older than us. But just to put it in perspective of how old we are as a party, we're going to be 100. In the next few years, we're going to be 100. And we are still the most popular single party in St. Kitts and Nevis. So we have a strong record of governance and so forth in St. Kitts and social transformation. So the party is making those changes. And we want to guarantee to the people of St. Kitts and Nevis that we are serious about our code of ethical conduct. We're going to bring new ideas, programs, and how we're going to bring the party forward. The specifics of which I know you would like me to share some with you, but at the right time, the party will share some. Nothing wrong if you want some,
No, not on the radio.
But the party is working and changing, transforming, and will determine, its direction. But a lot is being done. And we have to respond to the needs of our people because, the people are always the most important.
I believe in this saying that perception is reality.
Yes.
Especially as it relates to politics.
Yes.
Because you could be the most honorable man, but somebody just tell a good story.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden you're perceived as something else.
Yeah.
Right?
And Dr. Douglas, I would say in all fairness, he has been the victim of a lot of that.
We're not talking about Douglas.
Yeah? Huh?
We're not talking about Douglas.
Because he has suffered most. I don't know you're talking about him, but he's a prime example when it comes to distortion of a man's record and slander.
And I understand that. And yes, you're talking about.
Yeah.
And that brings me to my next question as well. I mean, the Azem Martin, he and I you go back and forth over politics on a regular basis.
Right.
Even downstairs right there in the complex. We stand up there for about 2 hours and talk.
Man, that's good.
Right? And after the 2015 election, I came back to St Kitts, and here and I, would have, back and forth. And in my mind, it was as simple as this. Regardless of if Dr. Douglas was guilty of these things or not, like you said, the court has found him guilty of any indiscretion, right? That's that. But regardless of his innocence or his guilt, the perception was that he was, questionable. And as a result of those questions, Team Unity was formed and they launched, what do you call it? A coalition against, to get Labour Party.
It sounds like they were founded in the sand. It wash away at some point.
And that's what I'm getting to know.
Yes.
That's what I'm getting to know. So my argument to Azem was simply this. I said, well, the perception of, a lot of the public might not have been the majority, but as the public, the perception of the three parties involved is that this individual is the problem. So I asked him, I said, why this individual is still there, leading us into another election? The result is going to be the same. And he had his defense and whatever. So I want to know what your take is on that, because it was clear as day for me. And if I was involved in the Labour Party, that would have been my single argument. I said, boss, it doesn't really matter what the truth of the matter is.
It might not be fair.
It might not be fair.
Yeah.
But I find that as a leader, he should have stepped back at that point and said, well, obviously I'm the problem. Doesn't matter if I'm wrong or right. I'm the problem. Let me let somebody else take the reins and lead the party into the election. And I feel that is what should have happened. And I believe running into 2 elections with Dr. Douglas. I mean, I'm not against the guy personally. I love him. I like him personally. Right? But like I said, that's irrelevant in the whole grand scheme of politics. Right? So what is your take on the leadership going into those 2 elections, knowing fully well that the leadership was the issue that a lot of people had?
Well, I would say one thing. If I were to ask Dr. Douglas to do something different, is that he should have defended himself more. Because some of the things that he was charged of, even when I was in the United States and I was listening to the Rancor in 2012, 2013, 2010, 11, 12,
Because he was very silent.
Yes.
He was about the allegations.
Yes.
Yeah.
I thought that he should have responded more. So if I were to ask him to do something, if I were to ask him to have done something differently, it would have been to defend himself and defend his record. Because he had an excellent record. Dr. Douglas met poverty in St Kitts at 40-something%. When he left, it was in the teens. So it means in those years, he transformed a lot of lives. Transformed St Kitts from a sugar-based country, sugar economy, to a service, tourism industry. Had a lot of people become professionals and so forth. Transitioned completely. He would have transformed St Kitts and Nevis, and I think that record was not presented strong enough. That is the only thing I would have asked him to have done differently in terms of controlling the perception.
And then that might have changed the narrative.
I think that would have had a tremendous impact in terms of the narrative. But I think in the end, history would absolve him, because I think a generation or two, when people would now be able to pull the papers and read objectively without the political rancor of the day affecting them, they will reach good conclusion. Just like with Robert Bratcher. Because Robert Bratcher was accused of having billions of dollars in Swiss banks and so forth. When the man died, they realized the man had no money. They said, wow, the man was an honest man after all. I met, and so sometimes time has to pass, generation has to pass for you to fully look at the record in a calm and deliberate and independent way and reach a conclusion. So I think in the end, history will absolve Dr. Douglas. However, the question you asked about the perception, there is that perception. I cannot run away from it, about him as a leader and so forth, and that would have its political impact, of course. But I think that also strategies can be used to manage those things. But in the end, in the final analysis, the St Kitts and Nevis Labour Party would look at the big picture, and it would determine what is the best way forward. And the comrades of our party will determine. So the question is, the answer to your question, the comrades will look at everything and determine the direction.
Fixing the machinery.
Yes, fixing the machinery.
Or at least addressing it to see if it needs fixing.
Every minute you need an upgrade here. Every
Yeah.
minute to say, and your iPhone come out and this come out and that come out. You need an upgrade now and then.
Well, we have a question from one of our journalists.
Yes.
And he would like to know if you plan to take over the party one of these days?
Well, I would say I don't. In the St Kitts and Nevis Labour Party, you should see one of the reasons why we survived so long and we are so successful as a party is because we have structures within the party to manage these things. That one just cannot decide that I become the leader. There's a process, of course, that one has to go through. The party has to ventilate it. The party does a full analysis and determines who will be the best person to take the party forward at any given point. That is why I say even with Dr. Douglas, the Commons will decide at the end of the day. So that would have to be managed that way. So I am in politics. I am there for my party. If at the end of the day, my party decide that I or somebody else, would be in the best position, whoever the party chooses would have to be, it's always a transparent, open system to determine that. So my answer is the party determines those things.
So if you're called to serve a leader, will you accept?
If I'm called, anything that my party called me to serve as, I will accept.
Okay.
Yeah.
We have another question from them. They want to know, when is the convention, conference / general council to vote for a new leader?
Well, I would say that the party would also, we're on a path now. We are putting a number of things in place, and the party has its conference in May, and the party will do that. The party is consulting with its people. The party has a number of teams that are working, because we have a process of selecting candidates. Anybody can become a member, almost a candidate of the Labour Party. You just have to be, of course, a member of the party. We don't select and handpick. That is why somebody like me go up in Upper Monkey Hill, whatever. I am chosen, not because of any special connection, because they think at the time that I'm the best. We don't handpick people in the St Kitts and Nevis Labour Party. And so to answer that question, the conference, we'll have a conference in May. The comrades would meet, they would look at the constitution, they would determine the direction in which we're going, and then I would tell you that the party will present before the year ends the direction in which the party chooses to go. So I'll answer that question saying that.
So we gotta wait to see what going on.
Yes.
Just a little bit longer.
Till at least after May to get some kind of juice. Okay, no problem.
It could come back.
I like how he put it, to get some kind of juice.
Our teeth.
Our teeth.
Bill, you have any?
I mean, I realize that the time is fast spent.
Like 4 minutes.
And
Right.
we're going to have to wrap up. But, of course, thanks for coming and being so open with us. We really appreciate you taking the opportunity to come and just start these things with us. Sometimes we could be a little non-traditional. So it's really a pleasure that you really came here. So I appreciate you for that.
Yes.
But looking forward, yes, you spoke about the fact that the party is now having discussions and more discussions to be had, especially in May and going forward. But what is your outlook for the Labour Party? Is it one you've spoken about the fact that when you joined the party, it was a time of some internal conflict and fracturing. Can you say that you have begun to see or have seen the mending of those fractures? And what is the present outlook personally for the party moving forward as it prepares to contest in the next election?
Excellent question. But one thing I would say about Kittitians, we are multifaceted. I swear I'm talking to people who study journalism for over 50 years. And our political education is very high. When I was in the United States, for me to have these political discussions, even about the United States, I recognize the person had to have some level of education. But I could pull a man off the street and say, kids, and we go have a political discussion. So this speaks volume of our people. That is why I say we are so educated. We just need the institutions in place to make sure that we carry out what we have to carry out. But the question is a very good question. My outlook with respect, the party was fractured, and there are people who have expressed that they have come back to the party. Sam Conda has expressed that. Dwyer Astafan has also expressed that. And there are a number of other persons who have expressed that they're either back or they're willing to come back to the St Kitts and Nevis Labour Party. We have passed through a very tough period. I see the party now really healing totally and really gelling. You know, we are at the crossroads again, but I think that we are in such a position that we can manage those things because of the experience that we would have gone through since just before, before the 2015 election with the splitting and the unity and so forth. So I am very, very hopeful. You know why I'm hopeful? We sent out a call for senators for the St Kitts and Nevis Labour Party. And if you see the people who applied to be the senator, we sent out a call to ask people to come and discuss. And if you see the people who show up to discuss, last election, even when we sent out the call for candidates, if you see the number of applications that we received, how do you know that you are viable and that you are, of course, a force to be reckoned with? It is when people of good substance are interested in putting themselves on the line to be with you. To me, that is the hallmark of viability and an organization that is still extremely relevant and has a lot to contribute to the people of St. Kitts and Nevis. And so I will wrap up by saying exactly that is the hope, the people who are now coming forward.
Very, very last question.
Yes.
Speaking of healing and coming to a better place, would they, based on the current climate of the party, and of course you're the chair of the party at this point, so you would, be...
We're talking to the right man.
Huh?
We're talking to the right man.
Yeah. You'll be in a good position to say what the feeling is in the party.
What the feeling is?
If Dr. Harris were to want to come back home to the party, would you accept him with open arms?
Well, let me say, with respect to the party, as I told you, there are other people who decided to come back to the party. But I think I can speak for myself, but in terms of the comrades, I think the comrades would actually have to make a decision like that. But I'll say this, the comrades have been hurt so badly and so deeply.
But it's going to be a long conversation.
Okay. All right. So even though we are open party, I want to put that preamble.
You're still human.
We're still human. We're still human.
Oh boy. Anyway, Dr. Drew,
yes.
thank you very much for joining us this morning. It was a wonderful discussion. I wouldn't even call it an interview. It was a conversation.
Excellent.
Wonderful conversation. Yes. So we do wish you all the best in your post as chair of the party. Based on what you know about you, we're sure that the party will be led in a more positive direction. And like I said, a lot of healing is happening, and healing is healthy and necessary.
Yes.
You have 4 years.
Doctor?
Yes.
He's an internist, and right now the Labour Party is being fixed internally. So he's a right man to be the job. He's the right man for the job. So once again, thank you very much, and we hope to have you back soon.
Yes.
To discuss for some more juice.
Yes, for some more juice.
After me.
And I'm ready to. I'm available, and we can have open, good discussion. This is what democracy is about.
Indeed.
Thank you.
Well, that brings us to the end of the show. We just had a wonderful conversation with Dr. Terrance Drew. I don't understand. The chair for the St Kitts and Nevis Labour Party, and also the constituency rep for number 8 for the Labour Party. Well, folks, it is hump day.
Hump day.
Middle
It's
of the week.
almost middle of the week, boy. Thank God. As usual, use the roads correctly, drive safely. Use all roundabouts correctly. Be careful when you're coming out of 4th Street and East Square Street, because the lights may be working properly.
Also, when you're going onto the Bay Road from the bottom of 4th Street, the same thing happens there.
Oh, for real?
Yep.
Oh dear.
Shocker.
Oh dear. Oh dear. And when you're using the roundabouts, please indicate while exiting the roundabout. Don't overtake in the roundabout. Stay in your lane in the roundabout.
Both figuratively and literally.
Stay in your lane, figuratively and literally. As well as please park your vehicles in a responsible fashion to allow our sanitary workers to collect our trash in a timely manner. If you park bad, the truck can't pass. We have a backup of garbage. It's unhealthy, it's unsanitary, and it smells bad.
Just not pretty.
And it ain't look good either, exactly. Also, let us lobby to our lawmakers and our policy drafters to address our very archaic laws like wearing camouflage. As well as the laws that speak to sexual misconduct and sexual assault and specifically, and especially as it relates to how we treat our minors and disparity between the genders, as it relates to sexual assault and sexual violence. Justice Subject 1.
Yes, sir.
And finally, I turn it over to the Master of Ceremonies, His Excellency the Honorable Kevon Ellsworth Elijah Mohammed Hanley,
Prosecco Papi. Prosecco Papi.
aka Prosecco Papi, with these words of wisdom. You have the floor.
And remember, everyone, you can't be everybody's cup of tea because you is not a mug.
Yeah.